Welcome to the Week 8 edition now of the quarterback video for rotocurve.com. And the videos as a whole for this week, there, of course, will be four of them as per usual. I am Ricky Sanders here with my sidekick, Jim McCormick, who has his lower third working. You can tell who he is when he speaks. Mine, for some reason, will not load, but we're going to fight through it because it's not a big deal. But what is a big deal is that you sign up for the RotoCurve football package, and let me put it up on screen as I always have an issue doing. Here we go. This, of course, rotocurve.com/free-trial. You can get optimized DFS lineups as tools, as it says. But what does that actually include? Position rankings, projections, cheat sheets, DVP rankings, points per attempt, red zone utilization, all included. You get optimized DFS lineups to DraftKings and FanDuel. You get access to player ownership percentage and analysis after Thursday night kickoff. So, of course, go ahead and take advantage of that free trial. Jim, quarterbacks this week. I think I have a unique take on them. I think a lot of people are going to be on the very, very cheap options. And I kind of have a mid-tier option that stands out to me in cash. So I'm really curious to see what you're looking at for cash games, because I think I'm going to be against the grain this week.
Yeah, I like that you usually have a pretty unique quarterback strategy, which is helpful. We tend to agree a lot with skill players, and I don't mind the differentiation that we find at quarterback. I guess one guy that I'm willing to take a gamble on. I call it a gamble because he's been so bad a lot of this year. But even in cash games, I think the floor is high enough for Russell Wilson as a favorite against this Saints defense. He's been good against the blitz historically in his career. The Saints lead the league in blitz percentage, but they're fifth worst in pass pressure, so they're not effective doing it, which is dangerous. The other thing too is just, they're favorites in a game approaching 50. I like the setup there. But really, if I'm going to pay down, which I'm going to do more than ever, I'm going to actually save money and take Jameis Winston here at home against an Oakland team that's given up a ton of points, the most yards in football. They're 10th lowest in pressure rating, so they're not effectively getting to the pocket. And then there's an interesting stat that I was looking at this week, toggling between pocket and out-of-pocket production. And Winston has 12 touchdowns outside of 7 of his 12 touchdowns have come out of the pocket this year. No other quarterback has more than 4. And, if they can do some design rollouts and with the lack of pass pressure, their ability to kind of design the bootleg, I think it could be helpful, especially, even though they've had some losses in the receiving core, I don't think there's too big of a drop-off from Vincent Jackson to Russell Shepard or using Adam Humphries. And then obviously Mike Evans is a monster. So they have a running game finally going. Oakland's a really easy team to beat up on, so really shares of Winston actually seem attractive to me. Plus, he's only 5,700 on DraftKings. It's either him or Derek Carr, I think, in terms of saving money. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the way a lot of people are gonna go. That game is moved to a pick'em, which is kind of interesting. But the over/under 49, it looks like the majority of the money is on the Oakland Raiders. Latavius Murray kind of average in the running game. We'll get to him later. I kind of like him for that price tag. But I think Derek Carr is going to be the popular option. Winston, too. I think there's a lot of upside there. But when it comes to quarterbacks this week, in terms of that upper tier, I'm looking at DraftKings right now. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quarterbacks priced ahead of the guy that I like and I think is the safest option. So it's still kind of mid-tier. I really like Andrew Luck this week, even coming off the big week last week. I think this is just a perfect setup for him. They play Kansas City at home, and, of course, the 350 and 3 touchdowns last week. What I really like about Luck is when you look at his numbers, he succeeds in the games where he's not under pressure. That offensive line is pretty bad. So in 3 games this year, he's been sacked at least 2 times, or 2 times or less. Let's put it that way. It's been exactly 2 times each of them. That's been the fewest times. He's tied at 3 times, and in those games, he's managed at least 331 yards in each. And the Chiefs have sacked the least amount of quarterbacks, so they produce the least amount of sacks of any team. So if he's not going to be under siege, from a defense, it's going to be against the Chiefs, who don't get after the quarterback. So you can mix up the scheme any way you want, but if Andrew Luck has time and he's got guys like T.Y. Hilton and maybe even Dante Moncrief, which certainly would help, and it looks like he's trending towards being back this week, I really think that Andrew Luck just has such a safe floor at home. Gore still looks good, but it's still Andrew Luck's team. He made Jack Doyle a tight end 1 last week, literally the tight end 1. So Andrew Luck is the guy that I find with the safest floor this week, who's still, for a guy that we consider an elite quarterback, or at least close to it, quarterback 7 in terms of pricing. He's a full almost $1,000 less than Tom Brady. So you still get yourself a bit of a discount. Let's move to tournaments, because it sounds like we like the 2 from that one shootout, and we like Luck and Cash. Right. If you're going to go that route. But there's definitely more to like in tournaments than there is for cash this week.
No, I agree. And also to just add to your point, you revealed something to me there that's interesting, meaning like reminded me of Andrew Luck and what he does with the clean pocket. And the Chiefs are actually last, not just in sacks, but also in pressure rating. So, hits, hurries, and sacks combined. They're only pressuring the opposing pocket like 15% of the time. League average is like 23 or 24%. So, this is a significant advantage in terms of his ability to kind of operate. So that's a good point. I
was just going to say that it doesn't jump off the page, so I don't think a lot of people are going to be on him because, the matchup as a whole, you look at the fantasy points allowed, they're kind of middle of the pack.
Well, and reputation still drives things. I mean, I know we all have a lot of data at our hands, but, the Kansas City was, second or first last year in sacks. They had 51 or 52 sacks last year. So, obviously that's Justin Houston and Tamba Ali has probably aged about 5 years, it looks like, this year. But, I think reputation still drives things. And Kansas City, even though they haven't been a good defense, pass defense, they're giving up a lot of yards, which is also something that has to do with their pass rush. But, yeah, I think reputation kind of drives down the impression that Luck is in a good position. For tournaments, I think I'm willing to go after some of the choice matchups that where we don't trust the quarterback, but we trust the matchup, which is to say Ryan Fitzpatrick, going into Cleveland. That's still just Cleveland still just giving up so many yards. And, again, a pressure thing. They don't pressure the quarterback. And we've actually seen Fitzpatrick do well when he's clean. Last year, that's pretty much what happened. They had the lowest pressure rate last year, and he responded. The other thing, too, is he's really a front-running quarterback in the sense that, when he's trailing in the second half, I think he has 1 touchdown and 10 receptions this year. And if they're up, it's kind of like he's a guy who operates under the guise of confidence. Another guy that I like in a similar situation would be the guy across from him who's really cheap is Josh McCown. The Jets still, even though last week what they did was they blitzed the second highest rate in football for the slate. They blitzed the Ravens 47% of dropbacks. That was effective. I think actually pass pro wise, Cleveland's a little bit better than Baltimore has posed over the rate. So it's really just about volume too. I think McCown could be busy here, kind of garbage time production. Plus you're paying nothing. I mean, you're paying literally, $5,200 is going to the basement. One more guy too that I like in tournaments. He doesn't have any help, but his price just never rises. Is Tyrod Taylor. He's actually really safe. If you're looking for a guy who is going to give you, that kind of 18-point floor in fantasy points in daily, that's kind of what he does. He's leading all quarterbacks in rushing. There's also just garbage time production here, which he has a history of doing against Buffalo. But even with all these injuries and everything, he still is putting up numbers. In ESPN standard points, which is a lot more conservative than daily, he hasn't been below 14 fantasy points since week 1. So he's been consistent. He's almost the Alex Smith of last year in the sense that his ceiling isn't incredibly high, but his floor is really sturdy. That can actually help in tournaments. I think we chase ceiling so much in tournaments, but if we're going cheap and we're going heavy everywhere else, we don't really need the ceiling from a cheap quarterback.
Yeah, I think you touched on a bunch of the guys that I like, especially with the Tyrod pick there at the end. So I'm just going to hit on a few others because I think we're pretty much on the same page in tournaments this week. Carson Palmer on DraftKings specifically is underpriced. He's still only at 6,000, and this Carolina defense has proved to be pretty bad this year.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty susceptible to the pass. I know we had the outlier performance against Julio Jones, which is driving it up a little bit, but still, I mean, this is a team that can't really cover receivers, especially without Josh Norman. I mean, I think they've allowed, what is it, the third most fantasy points, 1,779 yards passing already, which is very un-Carolina Panthers-like. And another guy that I like this week is Trevor Siemian, because I think everyone's going to be on Devontae Booker now that he's so cheap. But Siemian against this banged-up San Diego secondary has a chance to succeed too. I mean, since Verrett has gotten injured, they've kind of been trending up in terms of matchup for opposing quarterbacks. They were allowing about 280 yards passing, and it's only trending upwards. And I think Siemian with those solid receivers in terms of Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, while everyone's focused on Booker, is a way to kind of differentiate, or maybe even go both of them because Booker is so cheap. And he does catch passes, and the San Diego defense is one of the worst in the league, if not the worst in the league against receiving backs. It all could correlate together. So I think Trevor Siemian's a guy who's basically minimum price on DraftKings. And the other guy I want to mention, if there ever was a week, to go way, way contrarian and dip all the way down to the worst quarterback in the NFL, Brock Osweiler, this would be the week. I mean, eventually you would think with Will Fuller and with DeAndre Hopkins and with the emerging CJ Fedorowicz and with Lamar Miller who can catch passes, he's going to have a good week by accident one of these weeks, even though we all agree he is terrible and you absolutely do not want to roster him. But against this Detroit Lions defense that's allowed the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, they're passing touchdowns up to 18, which is tied for dead last with the Cleveland Browns. You already mentioned Fitzpatrick. I think you got to give him a shot this week, at least in one tournament. I think there is potential for him to finally go, like 302 touchdowns, even if it is by accident, even if it is throwing to pass to Will Fuller that he breaks for a long one. There's just so many ways to beat this secondary that I think he could fall into a monster game. But otherwise, I think you covered them all. Again, Osweiler, not a guy I'm loving to roster, but I do think that he has some upside in this matchup. Did we cover everyone, or did we miss anyone?
We did. When you include Brock Osweiler, it means you've included everybody. So
Exactly. So let's end on that low note, but remind everyone that our favorites are, at least my favorite, is Andrew Luck for cash. Who you like for cash? You like Winston?
Well, Winston's the guy I really like. I guess I would really shift Wilson over to tournaments just because the floor is actually a lot lower than it used to be because he's not rushing. He's just not running. And he might not be compelled to against that bad team. But I just see kind of a get-right kind of game for Seattle is kind of the idea. And for tournaments, it's interesting. But, yeah, Winston's the guy that I like in cash just because they're going to still pass a ton. And that game, has some healthy shootout ingredients itself.
Yeah, and we probably should mention Atlanta against Green Bay because Julio kind of does, I said Matt Ryan's name right. Yeah, Matt Ryan against Green Bay because he kind of does have that 300-yard receiving upside again against this Green Bay team that has all their cornerbacks banged up. He's expensive. He's more expensive. Luck, so I don't necessarily want to go there. He's got to have an absolute monster game to come through for you. He's kind of got to go, 350 and 3 touchdowns like Luck did last week, but I certainly think he has the upside of this matchup, so I don't want to finish quarterbacks without talking about him because I do think that they do have a good shot, and Green Bay's run defense is really stout, so we're not sure. I mean, our only sample of them being beaten is Ezekiel Elliott, and we think that this running game is nearly as good and should be able to succeed even without Coleman. I think that they've proven that they're pretty much an offensive machine, but we're not sure. I mean, this Green Bay team has shut down everyone else. So if they start shutting down Devontae Freeman, at least in the running game, I think we could see Ryan, even if he starts targeting Freeman, that will only benefit Matt Ryan. So again, Luck, my favorite in cash, probably Derek Carr and or the likes of Siemian or Palmer in tournaments. But that's all for the quarterback video this week. Again, I just want to reiterate, rotocurve.com/free-trial for week 7. excuse me, week 8. I'm a week behind in terms of getting all the great stuff that you usually get included in the package. That, of course, is the optimized lineups for both sites, all the wonderful tools like cheat sheets, DVP, red zone, all those good things. So rotocurve.com/free-trial. You can start in week 8. It doesn't matter. It's not too late. So take advantage of the great offer while it still exists. We will be back with running backs for this week. There's a lot to choose from this week, so it should be interesting.